Hi there, business owners, directors, and marketeers. In today's show, I'm meeting Alan Chapman from Host Digital, who works in the conversion rate optimization space, a very interesting space. And I want to talk all about it with him. I'm Lucas, your host as always, and I want to tell you a little bit about Alan before we get him talking here. So Alan is a conversion rate optimization consultant, as I mentioned, and he helps especially retail e-commerce businesses to turn website visitors into customers. That's their slogan, and that's their motto. That's what they're working towards too. So companies like French Connection, Horse and Curtis have used their specific 3-point formula to increase conversion rates and increase online revenue. And definitely I want to learn about the 3-point formula. I want to learn about your experiences. Hey, Alan, welcome to the show.
Lucas, absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Cool. Alan, tell us about your company. What is it all about?
For sure. So I'm a conversion rate optimization consultant, as you mentioned. So specifically, I help retail businesses to turn more website visitors into customers. So basically, I help retail companies sell more of whatever it is they sell on their website, sell more of their products on the site. So at the moment, where the industry is at, the average website conversion rate is 1, 2, 3%, something like that. So meaning for every 100 people who visit the site, about 3 people buy. So basically, I help my clients improve that number from 3% to 4%, 4% to 5%, whatever it is. Those numbers might sound quite small, but over time, they can make very big revenue differences.
That makes a lot of sense. We've been speaking to a lot of conversion rate sort of folks, and I think this effect of doing the small changes is sometimes overlooked at the beginning, but there's a lot into it. There's a lot to it. So my question would be, you mentioned you work with retail e-commerce businesses. What types of businesses, what types of people do you usually work with? What should we imagine there?
Well, it's a good question because conversion rate optimization can span across all industries, right? If you have a website and that website powers your business, it could be leads, it could be sales, then you're ripe for conversion rate optimization, right? If your conversion rate goes up, you're going to make some more money. What I found, I have worked across, fintech, health, insurance, retail, travel. I've done a lot of different industries, and ultimately I ended up niching down into the retail environment. And that's for a couple of reasons. The first is it's interesting to me. Retail customers, they tend to have a large inventory. They have a lot of SKUs. That poses really interesting challenges from a lifetime customer value perspective, average order value perspective, and all that good stuff. So it becomes more than just improving a conversion rate when you're working with retail customers. And I really enjoy that. But the other reason is the high street is really suffering right now, right? Every day in the news, it feels that stores are closing down. All the e-commerce leaders I talk to are under a lot of pressure to drive up, hit their revenue targets, drive up their e-commerce profits, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of opportunity there to help them hit their goals by increasing their conversion rates and drive up their online profits.
So I'm imagining fashion e-commerce stores. Is that sort of what you're referring to? So
it's funny that you say that. So retail obviously is quite a blanket term. It could be a lot of different areas. Fashion seems to be a sub niche that I found needs almost more help than most. Okay. I don't know why that is. I think potentially they historically have had a really strong presence on the high street, and therefore they felt the death of the high street, if I can use that term. They felt it the most. Yeah. So that's where I found there's most demand for not just conversion rate optimization services, but e-commerce services in general. So as you mentioned, I've worked with French Connection, Hawes and Curtis, Amanda Wakely. So for your UK audience, all those kind of high street brands will resonate. But that's certainly where I felt the demand the most.
Makes a lot of sense. So who would be usually the people then within those teams that would be reaching out to you or that you would be collaborating with? Is that across teams? Is that in the marketing department? What's your experience?
Yeah, what I found with CRO, I'm going to use that acronym CRO for conversion rate optimization, is it kind of sits in an intersect, right? Is it design? Is it technology? Is it marketing? And it's kind of all of those things. Typically, I'll work with a head of e-commerce, but depending on the business, it could be a director of marketing, maybe head of online generation or acquisition. So the job titles vary, but typically it's whomever controls or is responsible for increasing marketing profits, right? So they hold the purse strings for PPC, Facebook ads, SEO, all that good stuff. They're driving traffic to the website. They're seeing so much of that traffic bounce off the site. The conversion rates are like 1.5%. And it's frustrating, right? They put all that campaign planning, that marketing investment in, only to see people just kind of bounce and leave. So it tends to be that person, the person who controls the marketing purse strings. Yep. Typically, it's the head of e-commerce, but sometimes the job title varies.
And how would they usually find you then, right? So there's a lot of e-commerce stores out there. What would be the ways, a typical customer journey, let's say, for somebody to find you and bring them on board and bring you on board?
That's a really, really good question. I'm going to be honest, that's something that I still continue to evolve in my practice and try to improve. There's two sides to it. One is my own marketing, right? So often that involves LinkedIn. So I'm posting a lot, there's articles, I'm putting videos up, essentially getting people to come back to my website and hook them in from there. So that's the marketing approach. There's podcasts like these, of course, which can help, but generally just trying to keep a presence in front of my ideal client. But I'm also doubling down and doing quite a lot of outbound activity. So I'm reaching out directly. So rather than inbound marketing, it's outbound activity. I'm reaching directly out to the ideal customer. So head of e-commerce for XYZ Inc. And just kind of hitting them up. It could be emails, it could be LinkedIn messages, it could be phone calls, and increasingly I'm using video as well to actually kind of bring that human touch in and kind of, I'm not just saying, hey, I can help you, but I'm just trying to understand, is there an opportunity here? Are you feeling a lot of challenges and pressures internally at the company to increase your e-commerce profits? If so, it might be something I can help you with.
Makes a lot of sense. I have one follow-up question on this, which is we've seen a varying degree of awareness about the concept of conversion rate optimization within marketing teams, right? Or a varying degree of focus, even though, for somebody who's been working on this quite a while, there's a very straight line connection. You got traffic, you got a conversion rate, you got your output. Although sometimes this conversion rate concept doesn't seem to be spread out as much. Do you feel there is a lot of education that you have to do, or are people already aware and sort of, can easily understand what you're offering them?
I'll backtrack a few years. I think when I first got started in CRO, my background originally is digital marketing. I worked in a couple of different agencies and consultancies. CRO kind of happened, and the agency I was at started a CRO department. And that was really early days. So I'm talking kind of 2013, which is it's like dog years, right? In digital, like 2013 is a long time ago, right? And, the term CRO was really new. It was actually coined by a UK company called Conversion Rate Experts. Wasn't something businesses were familiar with. And traditionally they focused on driving traffic. All they cared about was traffic. And CRO was something that kind of came along very, very kind of belatedly. I think it took a long time for businesses to catch up with that. Fast forward to 2019, and what you find is everyone has heard of conversion rate optimization if they're in the digital marketing space. But you're right that there is a misconception about what CRO actually involves. And I think a lot of people mistakenly believe it's a bag of tricks, right? It's like a bag of UX tricks. Like you move a few pixels around the screen, you change the color of a button, you change it from a picture of a cat to a picture of a dog, and boom, your conversion rate's gonna improve. And of course, it's nothing like that. What I always tell my clients is CRO is marketing on your website. That's essentially what it is. And like all marketing, you've got to understand persuasive triggers. You've got to understand psychological principles. But above all, you've got to understand your customer. You've got to understand your customer so you can speak to their needs, wants, and desires, and you can persuade them to take the action that you want them to take on your website. So that's how I tend to frame it with my clients. I can certainly get into the methodology with you if you'd like, but at a kind of 10,000 foot view level, it's certainly about understanding your customer and using that insight to persuade them to take action.
Makes sense. Yeah, maybe if we do a couple of steps into that, maybe not all the way in, but if you could tell us a little bit about how you would be working with those e-commerce teams, like what is the model of collaboration looking like?
Yeah, great question. So it typically starts with what I call a conversion detox. And that's essentially a kind of deep dive audit of your website. And we'll go deep into the data, right? So I'm going to throw out a few terms. I think a lot of people are familiar with Google Analytics. We're understanding where the visitors are going on the website. We're running user tests on the website. We're recording videos of people on the website. We're running surveys. We're interviewing customer services and so on and so forth. So essentially, we're triangulating various different data inputs to understand more about the customer. And then we're using those insights to make recommendations back to the client. So when I first started doing Conversion Detox, it would be like an 80-page report. It was crazy. I had screenshots and visualizations and annotations, and it was very heavy document. But what I've started doing in the last kind of 18 months, I've streamlined it. I upload stuff into a client portal, and essentially what we have is wireframes with the recommendations, and it's very, very visual. And then we annotate those wireframes with the data insight that informs the change. So it's a lot more, I like to feel digestible and accessible rather than a 100-page report or whatever. But that's usually the kind of inputs and outputs that go into the first client engagement.
Makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, since you've been working with quite a bit of a range of clients, what is something that you see again and again being sort of, to be fixed on those pages? A couple of themes maybe that you identified of what could make people's folks pages better?
Yeah, there's so many things I could choose from. The first thing that springs to mind is, and I don't know any website I've ever reviewed that didn't suffer from this problem, and that was not being communicative or expressive enough with their value proposition. Right. So there's so many. We were talking about fashion earlier, so I'll keep with that example. There are so many fashion websites. You could visit that site. If you change the logo, it could be any other fashion website. They're just so similar to each other. And that's a tremendous missed opportunity, because if you're selling clothes, shoes, bags, coats, you're not just selling a commodity. There is something unique about your business or your product or your inventory that you need to communicate to your customers, right? So to give you an example, because I'm being a little bit abstract, I worked with a client earlier this summer, and they don't just sell like fashion goods, right? They sell durable fashion goods that last for life. Yep. They're built to last, meaning it's a one-time purchase. And if you buy a pair of shoes from them, you're never going to need to buy another pair of shoes, because that pair of shoes is going to last you for life. If that pair of shoes ever breaks, it's a lifetime guarantee, so you can get it repaired for free. And it's cost effective, right? It's cost effective because you only have to buy it once. It's not going to break. It doesn't mean you're going to have to buy another pair of shoes in 18 months and so on. So there's a lot of things there that I've just explained to you that hopefully give you a reason to check them out. Maybe you would go and buy from them, but simply just weren't communicated anywhere really on the website, or certainly not in a transparent manner. So I think being more forthcoming with the value proposition, and I am not just talking about the homepage, right? I'm talking about expressing your value proposition on the product list page, which is the search results for all the inventory that you sell, or the product page itself, even on the checkout pages. It's really got to pop, give users a reason why they should buy from you and not from anybody else. Because let's be honest, everyone's comparison shopping, right? There's a lot of choice out there. So if you can express kind of the essence of you, the you-ness of your business, then that's where a lot of the magic happens with conversion rates.
It's very, very interesting. And I would have one follow-up on that, because I'm super interested. Why do you think it is, because you mentioned it happens again and again, why do you think it is that it's difficult for folks to express their value proposition as strongly, or maybe to put themselves into the shoes of the customers? Because these are the themes that have been occurring in our interviews. Do you feel there's a specific reason for that? Or do you think there's certain methodologies that are maybe not as known that they could be making more use of?
Yeah, I think the reason is resource and prioritization, and those two things kind of intersect, right? So all the heads of e-commerce, heads of marketing that I talk to, they're busy campaign planning, worried about merchandising, worried about the next sale that's coming out, optimizing their traffic activities, and yeah, they make website updates, but it's usually like, hey, we got a new sale coming out, we got a new product coming out, right? Rather than fundamentally optimizing and changing the user journey on the website. Yep. So that's where it comes from, right? They're focusing on other areas. There's so much going on. They're busy. And because they're busy, they're not spending enough time with the customer and with the data behind that customer to drive meaningful, profitable changes on the website.
Makes total sense. You mentioned the teams being busy, right? The teams having to do a lot of things, so probably they are steering themselves by a couple of metrics that they then keep on focusing on. Did you, or what did you find to be in your environment that you're working at? What is a set of really robust metrics that you tend to focus on when you sort of working with those folks?
So that super depends on what the activity we're doing is. So, of course, the headline metric is conversion rates. Of course, it is, right? So, if you're selling shoes on your website, if you're office.co.uk or your Clark's, those are shoe retailers in the UK, then you're just interested in how many visitors came into the site and how many actually bought a pair of shoes. But it often helps to twin your metrics with another metric, because conversion rate is an efficiency metric, right? But it really should be twinned with a volume metric, which is probably going to be either transactions or revenue, because it's no good having a 100% conversion rate if 2 people came to your website.
Yep.
Okay, so always kind of offsetting the efficiency metrics with the volume metrics. But kind of to go another level deeper there, if you're focusing on an area of your website that isn't quite so close to the point of transaction. So let's take the product list page where you're choosing, you've got 20 pairs of shoes on the page, you're trying to choose which one. Then let's say you're running an A/B test on that page. Then the KPI, the key performance indicator, might not be sales. It might just be people who got to the next step in the user journey, which in this case would be they clicked and they went to a product page. So I always urge my clients, think about the micro KPIs as well as the macro kind of money KPI, especially when you're optimizing pages that are several steps removed from the checkout, from the sale.
Yep, makes total sense. So basically tying it to metrics that are also important for other folks in the business there.
Yeah, 100%.
Did you find any challenges in winning? Because you mentioned conversion rate optimization is tied into a couple of teams. It might be on the engineering side, it might be on the marketing side, it might be even on the C-suite level. Any challenges to win them to buy into conversion rate optimization? What is typical situations that you would find, or what is good way to convince other team members that are maybe a little bit removed from the marketing team to buy into the concept?
Well, my biggest challenge is not so much the competition. There is a lot of competition, but the biggest challenge is actually the status quo. Everyone's busy, things are going okay. Maybe they think they're going to hit targets, and it's a big ask to kind of bring in an external consultant, even if there's an ROI attached to that, and change things up. Because when you hire someone, ultimately you're going to have to change something internally. There's no kind of easy button where they're going to do all of the work for you. Ultimately, there's going to be some work that your business is going to have to do. And of course, with CRO, ultimately your developers are going to have to get involved at some point to make changes on the website. So I think there's a resource thing comes in, changing the status quo comes in. I guess another challenge I hear sometimes is maybe we could do this ourselves, right? So rather than outsourcing it to a consultant or an agency, they're thinking, well, maybe we could hire a kind of CRO unicorn to do this stuff for us. And the challenge there is, there's not a lot of supply in the marketplace. There's just not enough. Less the case if you're talking about a Facebook ads expert or a Google ads expert or an SEO expert. But in CRO, there's a lot less supply. So there's a challenge there with finding the right individual. But also it's kind of like finding a unicorn, because you've never seen one before, right? If you haven't worked deeply in CRO and you're trying to hire someone in CRO, and the likelihood of you hiring the wrong person is exponential, right? It's very, very high. So, and that has unfortunate business costs. You spend a while hiring the right person, you get them through the door, they don't do a good job, or they're not the right individual for that job, and you've lost 6 months, you've lost a year, when in fact you might have just hired externally in the first place, and you would have increased your conversion rates in the meantime. So sometimes it's a false economy, I think, to focus on in-house resourcing, but that's definitely an objection that I can hear from time to time.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. So what are you excited about in terms of conversion rate optimization? What are techniques, technologies, tools that is coming up right now, or where do you see sort of conversion rate optimization going within the next couple of years? What makes you excited about it at the moment?
So, yeah, well, I think I'd have to talk to the technology, of course, and speak to personalization. There's a lot of personalization happening right now, but it's still the exception rather than the norm. And where it gets really interesting is when you combine that with AI. And this is where CRO is going, right? It's not just, so a simple example of personalization on a website is, let's say you want to buy a coat, men's coat from the website. You go to the website, you check out some coats. Next time you come back to that website, even though you go to the home page, it might redirect you automatically to the men's section because it knows that you're a guy based on your prior search behavior. So that's an example of personalization. But where it gets really interesting is if you perform certain behaviors, certain touch points on the website, like you went to this page, and this page, you clicked on this, you read this, you spent X amount of time on the site, maybe you came back on mobile a week later. All these touch points can be fed into a machine learning algorithm so that the personalization you get is that much more relevant and targeted. And that's where CRO is going. So there's regression analysis there, there's predictive modeling there, and I think the CRO expert of the future is going to have to understand how to feed the algorithm with the right inputs and how the machine works in order to really exponentially grow conversion rates. So that's going to be the next competitive edge. We're not there yet. There aren't enough tools that do it well, not a lot of people who understand it well enough. But I would say in a couple of years' time, you're going to see more and more of that occurring.
Very interesting direction that it's heading towards, to the CRO optimization into AI and basically, doing probably a lot of the experiments for you, right? They're currently being done. Okay, so as we slowly coming to an end of the interview, I would have maybe one more personal question. Let's say you as a business person, right? You now have been in the area of conversion rate optimization quite a while. If you would go back a couple of years when you started out in conversion rate optimization, what would be one advice that you would give yourself on how to run a business in that field?
How to run a marketing business, how to be a consultant or an agency. So I would definitely say I made the mistake of focusing too much on trying to be the best of the best of the best. Like I wanted to be in the top 1% in the world at conversion rate optimization. So I always invest a lot in my training and my learning and my development. With that said, and while I still think that's a really honorable thing to do, and I still do that, to be honest with you, just because I love it, I wish when I started out, I'd spent more time learning how to be a better B2B marketer and salesperson. Because at the end of the day, it's not my expertise that are wanting, but it's actually how do you reach out to a client, or how do you market to potential businesses who need the services? How do I let them know that I'm here and I can help? Because I have a duty to do that. And I think a lot of people, when they get into this game, they don't appreciate how much effort and time you need to put into sales and marketing to get the business in. Even if you're the best in the world at what you do, you still got to do a lot of sales and marketing to feed your business and get that work through the door. So I would definitely have done more of that when I started out.
Very good. Thanks a lot for that insight, Alan. And I think with this, we're coming to an end of today's episode. I really appreciate you taking the time and showing us a little bit about the world of Host Digital and the experiences you've done in conversion rate optimization, especially in the retail e-commerce space. So Alan, thanks a lot for being part of the show today.
Lucas, pleasure. Enjoyed our talk today. Take care.